Welcome along to another episode, a new series of not the DePIN Coffee Hour on our own this time, the DePIN Coffee Hour and DePIN Connection teaming up to do the DePIN Future. That intro was absolutely awesome. Shout out to Carla from my team who put that together. I don't know when she did it, but fair play, Carla. Thank you for that. That was amazing. Bradley, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. Yeah, the intro was awesome.
Yeah.
And I'll say, happy we're talking about the future of DePIN because today the markets are red again. So
yeah,
let's talk about where things might be headed in the future, I think.
I don't want to say anything to get us banned on the first episode, but your leader in chief or commander in chief has been causing a bit of a ruckus with the markets. You guys over there on that side of the Atlantic.
No doubt about it, man. I mean, the escalations are back again. You know, the rare earth minerals are being held back by from China, and that could be detrimental to the global economy. And now I think we're talking about not only tariffs but holding back potential accessibility to software, and that would be detrimental to China's economy. So let's hope that negotiations take place, things are eased before they meet at the end of this month, assuming they still do meet, which I think they will. But certainly some noise in the short term, no doubt about that.
Yeah, it's turbulent times. I mean, if you're a new trader, I've been in the space since 2017, so I've kind of seen like the volatility, and it doesn't really. I was phased by it as like new traders would be, but I know there was a bunch of people who lost everything basically through cascades, liquidation cascades, Binance technical failures, apparently, potentially dodgy collateral.
Yeah. There's some weird stuff happening. I mean, realistically, if you're buying spot when the market's down and not on leverage, that's probably the best way to go. But if you're using cross margin, a lot of people were, prices that we didn't think could hit were hitting. I mean, you look at like Cosmos dropped somehow down to 0.001. There's some issues potentially with the price oracles on some of the exchanges.
Yeah.
People are having trouble buying. And I mean, the largest liquidation event in the history of crypto. So for people that are new to the space, I think you kind of have to go through a period of a washout, but that's the worst we've seen. It was absolutely nuts. I mean, and I agree. It sucks. I mean, a lot of people lost a lot of money in that, but I don't know. I think we'll still have to see what the fallout looks like. We don't know completely, what caused it. There's some fingers being pointed and so forth, but I still look. I remain bullish when you look at the catalysts that are coming up. On the utility behind DePIN, and there's a lot of projects we'll talk about today that are doing some real things, man, that I'm super excited about. And really in the short term, I look at it as noise, and hopefully you weren't on leverage. Hopefully you didn't get liquidated and you're holding spot and you're holding projects that you have high conviction for.
I feel like the cycle is basically people kind of get greedy, and then either the market moves enough to satisfy that, or it doesn't, and they start doing crazy leverage things, and then some opportunistic person spots it, or some whale, some large group with capital, and they just absolutely beat the paste out of everybody who was too greedy, essentially. And and that's not a judgment at all. I mean, anybody who trades with leverage, good on you if you have the stones for it. I don't have the nerves for it at all. It's all spot all the way for me, because it's already volatile enough, and at the end of the day, if you're holding something that you have high conviction in, like some of the projects we're going to talk about, and again, nothing on this episode or any episode of anything that I'm on should ever be considered financial advice, but if you are in the space, you're interested in the future and what technology is going to have, and you want to get involved with some of these projects that we're going to talk about, holding their token is a great way to do that. And again, you want to have a fairly high degree of belief that it's going to be something good long term, and then hold it for the long term. That's kind of been my approach. And you don't really care too much. The only thing that bad can happen then is that if a project goes really belly up suddenly for some reason, I don't know, like the founders were on the Epstein list or something. I don't know, something that you weren't expecting to come out of left field, and suddenly the project is just like murdered. You should be good. Other than that,
Yeah, I mean, look, it's incredibly important, and some of the things we'll talk about today. Looking at the teams, you know, in the past, I think with crypto, past market cycles, you've seen alt cycles where just everything, you know, explodes at the same time. For one, we have a lot more dilution this time around. We
Right.
have so many more, you know, tokens out there. You have, you know, the meme coin space where people can just, anyone can launch a token without having any technical background at all. And then I think we've seen that aside from spring of 2024, this market cycle has been largely driven by institutional money flows. I think that's one thing that's been missing for DePIN in particular, and why, especially this year, really since January, DePIN has been underperforming the rest of the market. I think there's some catalysts coming up that could change that. One of those being actually, if you want to pull, I just shared a post down here. I don't know if you're able to pull that up. I don't think I have the ability to do that, but this ruling by the SEC. So this came down really 2 weeks ago, and I posted about this, but there's been this uncertainty, this kind of gray area now for a number of years for DePIN in particular, where we didn't know if it was a security or if it would fall under the CFTC as a commodity. And, you know, this ruling came out just recently. I think it was with 00, actually. They came out and said that DePIN does, in fact, not satisfy the Howey test and therefore is not a security. And that's something that we've been waiting for years. So having that clarity, I think, is huge. Following that, if you noticed, we saw a lot of funding rounds close. I'm not sure if there's correlation there or not. We saw HiveMapper get $32 million in funding. We saw 375 AI got $5 million. I think Grass got $10 million. So I think it's been a lot of money sidelined, kind of waiting for this. And then the other thing I'll say is, you know, we have the spot ETFs that I think will come. The government shutdown has kind of put a pause on that for now, most likely. I think that will allow a lot of institutional money to flow in. But we did see our first NASDAQ listed company add a DePIN project to their balance sheet. So this is big, $344 million DePIN treasury focused on Aether. So that's a decentralized compute project. So this is obviously huge to see a publicly traded company add a DePIN project to their balance sheet. Okay. And it's not your typical digital asset treasury that's just adding crypto. Like, they actually have a functional business as well. They're adding a DePIN project to their balance sheet. So I do believe we could see a period where we do have a digital asset treasury or an ETF focused around DePIN projects. And that's, to me, the one thing that's been missing for this market cycle, because retail has been largely non-existent since January. A lot of people got washed out. I think now that we will see some of that traditional finance money flow in, especially with the spot ETF with Solana. And there's a lot that's being built on Solana right now in the DePIN space. I think that does bode well for DePIN looking forward.
Yeah, I agree completely. Those are all really bullish indicators for me as well. There's been a lot of capital, in particular the one with the capital from VC. It seems like it just seemed like all of a sudden there was a rash of announcements for DePIN recently around decent, funky kind of funding that would get you through a bear market period. So I think I'm taking that as a very bullish sign for DePIN as a whole. So I suppose with all that said, will we jump into, well, maybe we should just explain what this show is all about, first of all. So kind of an unusual one relative to what we've both been doing up until now. This is just, the idea here was that we would get together and talk about the whole sector, and then each month we'll have an episode where we dig into one or two categories depending and talk about the projects in more detail. But just for today, we wanted to kind of look at the whole space. So we got together and created some categories. These are our categories, I suppose you could say. You know, both of us have a fair amount of exposure relative to the normal Joe when it comes to the DePIN space. But, you know, I'm certainly not an all-knowing expert. I think it would be fair to say that, you know, you don't know absolutely everything either, Bradley. That would be quite unusual if you did. No. You're the Bradlopedia Yeah, of DePIN. But yeah, we're going to look at things from the perspective of kind of just to give you a very high level idea of what each of these projects is doing, why we think it's exciting for the future. And then we might, in some cases, talk about tokens and what their chart has been doing, not really very deeply. Again, very much with the view that we're just setting the scene, and we're going to come back and talk about these in more detail later on. So with all that fun stuff said, this is a new studio that we set up especially for this.
Yeah, what category do you want to jump into first, man? I mean, yeah, so it's going to be open dialogue. I think there's just so much happening right now, so much to talk about.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, what category do you want to start out with?
Well, let's go with robotics. I'm
Okay.
trying to find where. There we go. Thank you, Carla.
Perfect. Perfect. Yeah, so the robotics space, one of the things for me, and I've been rebalancing my portfolio to be heavily focused on robotics. The main reason, looking back over the last few years, like AI has really led the way. And I think we've seen a lot of the AI-based projects do very well at times over the last few years. But you look at the Web 2 space, or at least I do, as, okay, kind of what sectors will mirror that in the crypto space. In robotics right now, if you look at traditional markets and TradFi markets, there's a lot of money flowing into the robotics sector right now. And I believe even Jensen Huang with NVIDIA was saying how that's their next big opportunity. I think that we're going to see robotics really catch fire here. And that's why I have been rebalancing in these projects here. And I think this is a really good list. Do you want me to kick off, or do you want to start off?
Yeah, I mean, I think when we put our heads together on this, I think we were both completely agreed on 3 of these at least. Yeah, if you want to take us through your understanding of what each one does, and maybe I can quickly touch on tokens if they have them.
Yeah, for sure. So Aoki is one that has been really strong, okay, especially with the recent market pullback. It's something that I think everyone should at least have on their radar. Nils is their CEO. He's been crushing it. And they do updates every Friday. So their last few updates in particular have been pretty impressive. They're talking about building out the real world web. So the way Nils talks about it is, the internet was a way for humans to digitize things. The real world web is a way, it's kind of flipping that on its head. And it's building out the internet for robots. Because with robots, they have to be able to navigate the real world. And yes, they have sensors on them, they have cameras, etc., but they still need maps, okay, to navigate the real world. And that's essentially what Aoki is building out. And they're doing it in a decentralized way. So, one of the things, you think about the humanoid robots, for example. Tesla is going to be building them out. Now, their robots will be able to have conversations with each other and navigate amongst each other, but you have other, companies like the Optimus, right? That they won't be able to navigate amongst each other. What Aoki is doing is building out a mapping system so that all robotics across the entire world can navigate amongst each other. And they have some big contracts coming in. They have conversations right now going on with one of the largest robotics companies in China. By the way, China is like 10 to 20 years ahead of the US.
Oh yeah, miles ahead
when it comes to robotics. And but they have ongoing conversations. They already have 7-figure contracts. The most recent one, this big one out of China, they're talking about giving them exclusivity in certain regions. They also had a really large airport in Singapore approach them, coming to their office. They're wanting to work with them. They have so much momentum. If you look at their chart and how they performed against the rest of the market with this recent pullback, to me, Aoki is one I've added a lot to in my bag, not financial advice, but one that I think has a very, very bright future ahead.
Yeah, the chart's been pretty steady. Like in a market where it's been kind of not great for a lot of DePIN, it's been really steady. FDV 239 million. It's probably cheap at that level of FDV because of the sheer size. Like pose mesh, isn't that what it's called? I might not be pronouncing that right, but that's the way I read it. Where like everything that's on the network essentially will know where everything else is, and they don't have to like send a signal all the way back to a base to figure out like where they are relative to where they need to be. They can just communicate with everything that's near them, kind of thing, in a in a really decentralized way.
Yeah. So example of this would be like a grocery store. If a robot needed to come in and navigate a grocery store, that robot could scan a QR code essentially and download a map, if you will, access a map on site and be able to navigate that grocery store that it's never been in before. And one of the things they're finding here is, for businesses, they could upload all of their mapping to a centralized entity like AWS, or they could host it locally and have the robots access it locally. And I think there's going to be a big demand for that. One of the things we're seeing like with these robots is it's going to be a way for these big entities to try to farm info and data from people. Okay. So there's going to be a whole newfound reason to care about your security of your data and wanting to host it locally in a decentralized way, because we've seen this story before, right? Where an emerging technology, centralized entities use it to farm your data and monetize that and use it against you. So I think Aoki is looking to solve that problem. So I think current market cap probably is like right around like 60 to 70 million too, with circulating supply. I would think somewhere around that range.
83.9 is the unlocked market cap.
Okay.
Yeah, they have a 10 billion max supply.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, it's 2 cents, 2.3 cents at the moment. So yeah,
it dropped down to like 1.7 in the market drop last week. I did manage to pounce on some around 2 cents. So that's one I'm going to continue adding to. GeoNet's the next one I want to talk about. That is probably my top DePIN holding, actually. So Mike Horton, also that guy's freaking genius. He's their CEO. What they're doing is building out a network for very precise location data. So when you tap into a GNSS or global navigational satellite system, there's about, I think, 4 or 5 of those around the world. You have Europe has Galileo. You have Russia has, I forget what the name of theirs is. You also have, China has theirs. The US has one, GPS. So you guys are probably familiar with that. When you tap into these satellite systems, you can only get within a couple meters of accuracy. And generally to connect to, I think, 4 satellites at a time in order to triangulate your position. That's fine for certain use cases, right? If you're just trying to get, directions from one place to another and you're driving, okay, you can be a couple of meters off. That's not a big deal. When it comes to autonomous vehicles, which is going to be the biggest robotic sector to start with, flying drones
where they don't have roads to kind of guide them, where they can go literally anywhere. Like, you need to be
very accurate,
centimeter precise.
Absolutely. And agriculture is another big one. So what they did is they used a token incentive model to essentially set up these base stations all over the world, and that helps to triangulate that position. It actually corrects for the margin of error from the satellites, so where you can get in that 1 to 2 centimeter level accuracy. They're working with the U.S. Department of Agriculture. They also are very heavily going to be working in robotics. So it's called RTK, real-time kinematics. Okay, and that's what the base stations are. That's that technology is called. So robotics is going to be huge, and actually they feed into Rover, and Rover is collecting data that's used to train autonomous vehicles. They're tapping into the GeoNet network to get really precise location data for that data. So Rover is using LiDAR technology. Okay, so you put a unit on top of your car, and the LiDAR technology uses a laser system where as you drive around, it shoots out lasers that have a return, builds like a 3D rendering around you. And that data is really, really valuable for training autonomous vehicles, but also for robotics for the outside world. Aoki's kind of mapping the inside world, whereas Rover's mapping the outside world. And using the GeoNet network, not only are they getting this data set, but it's a very precise location on the data set. So their tokenomics are actually intermingled. So as revenue comes in, it helps both projects. Very early stage project. The market cap's a little bit higher. The circulating supply is a little bit higher than what it shows on CoinMarketCap. But that is a project I also have a lot of investment in GeoNet. GeoNet got all the way down to like 10 cents in the market when the market dropped out. It's already back up to about almost 15 cents. So It's rebounded quite nicely. I think it's the one project that's probably green today versus the rest of the market. If you go to the daily, I think it's up.
Yeah.
I think it's about the only project that's up. Yeah, about 11.5%. I was looking this morning. So all three of those projects, to me, they hit the robotics narrative that I think is going to be, what we've seen with AI the last few years. I believe looking forward, that's going to be robotics. They're all Rover's announced they have a big last mile delivery service they're inking a contract with. They have 300 companies in their pipeline. They have 20 proof of concepts or POCs in place where they're testing out the data. And obviously that's the sales cycle. They test out the data, then you ink a contract. So all of them have real revenue coming through the door. They're all solving real world problems. They all have amazing leadership. And they're all three that I have pretty heavy investment in myself. So I'm very excited about all three of those projects. I think those are the ones that I'm very focused on looking forward right now for sure.
Yeah, I mean, Rover looks like it's just on the 7-day. It looks like it's a good time to buy the dip there. As you say, very early stage. So, that's the kind of one. Some of these plays I feel like are the kind of ones where you can buy them, again, not financial advice, but you can buy them and hold them for like 5 years and it'll be worth, a fortune by then, or 10 years.
Yeah. I mean, for sure. I think some of these, we're so early in this, people don't realize how big autonomous taxis are going to be. It's going to be a multi-trillion-dollar industry, and it's going to unfortunately replace a lot of the gig economy. That's actually kind of a bad thing because the gig economy has held up our job market largely, but it's going to be a multi-trillion-dollar industry. Actually, I have a deep dive on Rover and a deep dive on the Rover's tokenomics, 2 videos I posted on my YouTube channel just within the last 2 weeks. So highly encourage you. It's linked in my X profile, just DePIN Connection. Highly encourage you to check that out. In both videos, I get into the nitty gritty details on what Rover's doing. I'm working on one for Aoki. I also have GeoNet. I've actually have interviews with the CEO and founder of both GeoNet and Rover on my channel as well. So encourage you to check that out if you want to learn more. And then Peak is like the machine economy for robots. So I know you can talk more to them. I think Peak is a solid project. I think it'll do very well. It has performed very well over the last few months. I know they have some ambitious goals, and I think that they will do well. Nadix is also collecting data for autonomous vehicles. So their main data flow, their most valuable data flow, they have a hardware device you can plug into Teslas, and it collects all of the multi-camera data. And they're using that as well to train autonomous vehicle models. I know they were on a robotic space recently, and their founder was talking about how they're working with a lot of these companies that are getting into self-driving vehicles, and the amount of data they need to collect. The only way they can get there is through DePIN, through these networks and HiveMapper's and others. So those are really the three for autonomous vehicles, and we'll talk more about HiveMapper later. But HiveMapper, Nadix, and Rover, to me, all of them are collecting data that this multi-trillion-dollar industry really hinges on. So they're incredibly valuable. GeoNet factors in there, and then obviously Aoki on the inside world. And then I don't know if you want to speak more to Peak. I know Peak has done very well, and I know they do hit the robotics side of things.
Yeah, I like Peak. It's just a personal thing. I just think again, I'm by no means like popping the hood of their blockchain and looking underneath to see what it is, but I like layer 1 plays where it's for specific things. I do imagine a future where we live in a sort of a multi-chain world where there are specific use case layer 1s. It's one of the reasons I kind of was a fan of Cosmos, and kind of am still a fan of Cosmos. So yeah, I think I could definitely see the need for that. I just think when you're into kind of layer 1 plays where it's like that, it's specific for they're trying to be the L1 that forms the backbone of the machine economy, DePINs, robotics, presumably, and everything basically along those lines. So I just feel like it's a kind of a blue chip play, let's say. Plus, I just really like the way they do their marketing, the way they communicate. I think is great. So yeah, I'm they've been on my radar for a while. I have small amount of peak. Nailix is the same kind of deal. I feel like self-driving cars is a kind of a short to medium term thing. Like I don't exactly know how long it's going to take, but I would imagine it's going to be very soon, where we're all just basically being driven around by our electric self-driving cars that are probably plugged in by our Chinese robots. So like I don't think that's, like, if that's a decade away, I'd be shocked. That we're at that level of sort of automation around us with robots and everything.
Yeah, it'll be sooner. It'll be sooner.
Yeah.
Some of the stuff that Niels is talking about with robotics is insane. Like, they had the government of one of the countries over in Asia reach out asking how long it'll take for them to have robots that can push wheelchairs around like theme parks. And he thinks they can get it done by the end of 2026. So
Wow.
it's pretty remarkable. And I asked, I was like,
very
why is China
specific use case?
Oh yeah, so they are on the radar of a lot of big companies now. I mean, if you look at some of the accounts that are following him now, you have some higher ups from Nvidia, from Tesla, from a lot of these big companies. Aoki's really on the radar of some very powerful companies right now. And I asked him, though, I said, why is China so far ahead? It's very interesting, answer from Nils. He said, the government has been investing heavily in the robotics companies. The main reason is because they've had such a declining birth rate. Well, I mean, they prevented people from having more than one child for a long time. So he said it's a necessity for them because they're not going to have enough young people for all the labor they need. So they've been ahead of that. I mean, they've been really moving into robotics and investing heavily into it for some time now. And that's why they're so far ahead. But we will certainly be catching up. But from a global perspective, the market is there.
I feel like China plays the long game. Like, I feel like they were waging an economic war before we even realized there was a war. As in, by we, I mean the West. So yeah, like they're just miles ahead with a lot of things that are going to, pay dividend in like 10 years or 5-10 years. Energy, especially. Et cetera, et cetera. I mean, obviously AI. I feel like the US is still winning the race in AI at the moment.
At the moment, and we'll talk about that when we get into the decentralized compute projects, because you brought up something really important. That's power. I also have a video on that on my channel about how China is winning the power race when it comes to like the electricity infrastructure. And that is going to be potentially what tilts the AI race in their favor on why decentralized compute is going to be so important. And I think some of these projects will do really well.
I actually watched that video. I saw your video on that.
Nice.
And I didn't agree with all your conclusions about China, but because I think that they are like, I do think there's an aspect of them just not giving a shit about the environment that much, like it's actually not phrased the right way. I think if they need the power, they'll burn the coal kind of thing. But so they're a bit more pragmatic about the immediate term. But I think they're also doing a huge amount with these modular nuclear reactors, and
for sure.
And they've a ton of green tech,
solar,
energy.
A lot of solar.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
So if there's a thread to pull, I feel like they're pulling it because they realize, again, this comes back to my point of view on it, which is that they're playing the long game. They're looking ahead and they're going like, where do we not? I mean, I guess that's one of the benefits of not needing to worry too much about a populace and whether or not you're going to be reelected next term, is that you can do things that might not be popular right now because you're going to need them later.
Sure. Yeah, they're
democracy.
They're building out power infrastructure. Yeah, they're putting in far more solar than we are. I think we're going to have to change that. And I talked about that in the video in some of the solar investments I'm looking at. But they also they're responsible for 95% of the new coal plants being built globally. So I think to your point,
built anywhere else. Like, most of the rest of the world is like, no, we probably shouldn't do that anymore.
For sure.
But you look being pragmatic. They're going, look, we need this. We're estimating we need this amount of energy, and the only way to get there is just fire every shot we have at it. So
that's absolutely right. Yep. There's no
I'm
doubt.
sure if they can get to a point where they don't need the coal because they've got nuclear, they'll just do the nuclear because it's more efficient.
Yeah. Yeah. Nuclear is having a big comeback,
Modular
man, globally and in the US. I mean, that's why uranium, spot uranium, I think is going to continue going up. But all right. What's the
They do
next
wireless.
category? Okay, cool. Yeah, man. So the wireless sector is massive, and
Yeah,
we're seeing helium is really led the way. I think they're majorly pioneers in the DePIN space. In fact,
for
a
sure.
lot a lot of people got into DePIN because of helium. Myself,
Yeah.
included in that. They are the first project to become net deflationary as well. So their token burns from revenue exceed the amount of new emissions that are going out to network participants. So their actual total supply has become deflationary, is decreasing because of the revenue that's coming into the project. So
Can I just
very
say that there's
impressive.
a lesson? Sorry for interrupting, but can I just say I've just been I've spent hours pretty much every day for the last a good while on tokenomics and diving into token economies, and every DePIN project should take note of that. Your token economy should be deflationary. Like there should be less being
Should get
emitted
to
as
should
being
get to a
burned
point.
or sunk.
Yeah, should
Sorry.
get to that point. It's really opened up an interesting discussion around token burns and whether or not it should be done from purchase on the open market or whether it should be done from burning out of the treasury. And I think, just like they've been a pioneer in getting deep into where it is, I think this discussion right now, I'm actually going to be on a space on Friday to talk about this as well. But I think it's making us look long and hard at tokenomics and how those burns take place, because we haven't seen the price action react the way you think it would from it becoming deflationary. So
Right.
all that said, I mean, guys, they're doing huge things. They're about to also launch in Mexico. So they have a big deal as announced earlier this year with the telecom out of Mexico. So we should see a lot of revenue growth from there. They also did brownfield sites, so you don't actually even have to buy their hardware if you have, a router that is able to be utilized, which there are a handful of them. You can actually change the configuration on your own router and participate in the Helium network without buying their hardware now. So they're doing a lot of big things for sure. And I think, but you see the price, right? So
Yeah, the price is
um,
super by the dip time with helium, if you believe in the project, of course. It's
yeah, that last market cycle, it's really interesting. It's a good overview of what we've seen in DePIN altogether. Is the last market cycle, the prices were completely disconnected from reality. Everything
yeah,
was very overvalued and there wasn't really revenue. Now all of a sudden we're seeing, and you had too much supply, right? There, in other words, the network was built out, but there's no usage. We're seeing the opposite now, especially this year. Prices have come down and been suppressed so much in DePIN. We're seeing the revenue now is growing. We're to the point now where there's more demand. So customers are like, hey, we need more data, or we need infrastructure in this place, as opposed to the opposite problem of having infrastructure that wasn't being used. So it's
right.
been really interesting to see this shift. Now the question is, okay, when do those come back together, and where do you find like an equilibrium that makes sense? And I think we're going to get there. But right now, like the fundamentals are stronger than ever. The prices are just lagging, in my opinion. And I think helium's a great example of that. And,
I
and
mean,
Daba,
they're
sorry, go
still
ahead.
the gorilla in the room at like 469 million
For sure.
FDV.
For sure. Yeah. Yeah. I know there's no doubt about it. It's another thing where some of these DePIN projects, you see a lot of emissions in the early stages. And then helium has become net deflationary, but it's almost like the fundamentals had to catch up to that early deflation, or early emissions that went out. And I think we're getting there. I think we're finding this equilibrium, and it'll be a good case study to look back at for sure.
Right.
Daba Network is doing something somewhat similar. They're building out infrastructure. They're building out broadband infrastructure in India.
Yeah.
And they've taken an interesting approach where, as opposed to helium, where it's very hands-on and you're deploying DABA is doing that for you, and they're matching supply and demand, and they're fixing some of the problems we've seen with other networks where people deployed all over the place without any strategy behind it. Really, DABA is only deploying in places where there's demand. So India is it's a pretty much a primed country with 1.4 billion people.
Yeah.
Only
Very high
5%.
density.
What's that?
Very high density population.
It is, yeah, in the major cities especially, and then you have like, I think 5% have access to broadband, and only
Yeah.
50% have access to internet at all, or about 60% actually. And the vast majority of them are using cell phones for connectivity.
Yep.
You know, and the government was responsible for building out Wi-Fi infrastructure, and they did a really good job of getting this infrastructure built under the highways and the railroads. But that last mile, getting it into the cities and towns, is kind of where they've hit a roadblock because it can be very expensive. So that's where DABA's come in. They're working with local cable operators, so LCOs, who built businesses around, putting out satellite TV in these different areas. And just like everywhere else in the world, people are wanting to cut the cord, right? Cut their cable. So they're helping these companies, these local companies, shift their business model now to building out Wi-Fi infrastructure. And I think at this point they have 20,000. Let me see here. Let me share this real quick. Sure. So if you look at the DABA Explorer, I don't know if you can pull that up. They have 20,000 hotspots, over 20,000 hotspots that have been sold. They now have 18,374 installed. Okay, and then you look at the bandwidth that's used, almost 20,000 terabytes. That's incredible. 50,000 active users connecting. So they are certainly, their fundamentals are strong. They should be launching their token in Q4. They've already had like their Genesis event where you select your deployers for, because I own a bunch of these hotspots that I pre-ordered, but the token launch should be sometime in Q4, and I think this is going to be a really successful project. They've had some pretty big financial backers as well. So DABA's one.
So you own hotspots. You own DABA hotspots that will be deployed somewhere in India, and then there'll be some sort of revenue share, which makes it worth your while paying.
Correct. Allegedly, it'll be worth your while. I think it'll be worth your while. Yeah,
it's wild to think that you can do it, like you can own infrastructure on the other side of the world, essentially.
It is, yeah. And I think this is where DePIN is also going to, make a big splash, is in emerging countries, where now they can access capital from other countries, right? Where maybe you live in a country that doesn't, average income is really low. In India, the average income is very low, but maybe you don't have access to that much capital. But now if you can access, emerging markets can access capital from other countries like the US, like Europe, that's a game changer, and having it tokenized, you don't have to deal with sending cross-border payments and all that. I mean, it's very easy. You just get sent tokens over the blockchain, right? And it kind of removes that friction. I think it's absolutely massive. And then Fractals, I would kind of put Fractals, I know it's not on the screen here, but they're doing kind of a hybrid here, kind of like what Havelo's doing. Okay. And I'll say that. So basically, let's say that you are a deployer, you want to raise capital. You can list a location on Fractals, like with Helium, with XNet, which you'll talk about here in a minute. And you can crowdsource, investment from different people, so you can own a fractional part of a deployment and get paid out a fraction of the tokens in that site. So it takes the Helium model, which you'd have to be very hands-on, and gives you an option that's kind of like the DABA model, where you can be hands-off and own fractional ownership. And I think Havelo is doing something very, very similar in that they're taking a bunch of DePIN projects that they can connect you with, right, for your compute resources. So if you don't want to be hands-on and doing all the research and finding out which project to connect your compute to, Havelo is doing that work for you, right? Where you just go to their site and it's very easy, right? So I kind of put you and Fractals in kind of the same category, where it's like hey, it's very simple. I think you have the steps here, right, on your website. Or you guys just revamped your website. Here it is. So sign up, install your computer, connect your device, boom, and it connects you to these different projects where you can monetize your compute resources. So these aggregators, if you will, it's kind of how I look at it to streamline participation. Havelo and Fractals, I think, are in the same boat there, but Fractals, of course, deals directly with the category we're in, with these different networks here. I'll let you talk to Chirp and Adrena and XNet. I do like XNet as well. I have, I know a lot of people that have deployments with XNet and have had them on the space before, but
yeah, I mean, look, I don't know a huge amount about a lot of these projects. I've done a little bit of research. I talk to people all the time, every week on the show. But these guys, yeah, they came up when we were researching, projects who I haven't spoken to actually yet, who are active in the space. Chirp are decentralized telecommunications. It's a SUI project. They're kind of IoT. They have a bent towards IoT, mobile voice and broadband. So yeah, it's an interesting project. They have kind of these multi-protocol antennas that support a wide range of standards. So yeah, I suppose without kind of getting too into the weeds on it, I mean, the kind of thing is that they're trying to unify and kind of enable seamless interoperability between a range of IoT sensors and devices. So I think it's one of those ones where, still I feel like it's still very early days for them. And yeah, could be an early play. So that's them. As far as Andrena goes, again, just decentralized autonomous wireless network. It's a Solana project. And just again, kind of trying to decentralize, allowing individuals to become micro ISPs essentially. So participants can install the hardware, share their bandwidth with their neighbors, and earn rewards for that. Sort of peer-to-peer wireless network that bypasses traditional kind of telecom. So yeah, it's again another last mile, a little bit like DABA. I don't think they're specific to India though. The way that DABA have kind of launched there, and I can see the way DABA's model is set up makes a lot of sense for India. So again, this is kind of highly lucrative last mile kind of a project. They did partner with Helium, seemingly, which is part of the reason they made the list. So yeah, and currently have raised 35 million in funding. So strong team there, and Solana ecosystem. So I'm a fan already because of that reason alone. And then XNet, there's a little bit of I just spotted an error. Oh, it's been fixed. My God. XNet, that's a enterprise grade neutral host decentralized network. So wireless again, carrier grade Wi-Fi and cellular. Again, setting up hardware in high demand locations, kind of handles the network offloads, data traffic. I think that one's US, if I'm correct, more US based. But it's kind of more B2B, which I just thought was a little bit different than some of the others. I think a neutral host model, which kind of solves some of the in telecoms, that's been a bit of an issue. I think they've a roaming agreement with AT&T, and which is like fairly serious real world validation for decentralized wireless. So kind of, I suppose the play there is that they're bridging the gap between kind of Web3 infrastructure and the kind of trillion dollar legacy telecom industry.
Yeah, XNet and Helium both are doing offload for AT&T. So And there's a big market for that. And I think XNet right now, at least more, I know recently had the best payback period if you're deploying hardware.
Right.
I mean, you think about these telecoms, right? They can build out 5G infrastructure. They have a big problem though in certain, inside of certain locations, particularly if you're like at a restaurant or a gym that gets really bad service.
Yeah.
So those locations,
you go to any major conference where they haven't reinvented. Like I was at when they did the blockchain Paris thing. You're in the Louvre underground, and it's just like the internet was just not amazing. Because there's just too many people. The density of people is so spiky and abnormal.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So I think in areas or like airports or gyms where there's really spotty service and people are there for an extended period of time, those are the areas that if you deploy, you can make really good money because the amount of data offload, essentially they roam from their network from AT&T off to either hardware, or if you reconfigured your router, it like seamlessly moves them over to your internet. And for all that data that's offloaded to their device, you get paid basically in tokens for these different projects. So if you can find those locations where, the people are there for extended period of time, the service is not very good, and they're forced to roam onto those networks, people are making a killing right now. Like you can do quite well in those areas. But yeah, I know XNet and Helium are both partnered with AT&T. Andrina, I think it was Dawn before. So I was like, what is Andrina?
Dawn Protocol, yeah.
Yeah. Right. Okay. That makes sense. So I was just looking it up. So, to your point earlier, I don't know everything about DePIN, that's for sure, but that's something I learned today.
How could you? In all fairness, nobody could.
There's so much going on.
It's exploded in growth over the last couple of years. So, I talk to people every week. I talk to 3 new projects every single week, and I still spent probably 20 hours getting ready for this episode, just researching different projects, reading about what they were doing, and trying to understand some part of the technology to try and tie it together with what that has in store for us in the future. So, And by the way, we're only scratching the surface. Like in each of these categories that we've created, like there's probably 50 other DePINs in each of the categories that we're not talking about today.
For sure.
On that, actually, if you're watching this and we haven't talked about your project, feel free to give them a shout out in the comments.
For sure. And get ready for there to be about 10 times more, because with that SEC ruling, everyone's going to try to claim they're a DePIN, I think, moving forward. So we'll have to wait and see like what details they come out with as far as what actually classifies you as a DePIN and not, now that they came out with that ruling that it's not a security. But this is a fun category. Okay. Some sensor categories.
Yeah, I think just on that security and utility token thing, I think like if you create a good token economy at the start of your DePIN network, where there is an actual genuine utility where you need the token to use the network, like where it's the oil or the fuel of the network, then I feel like you're always going to have a fairly strong utility token case. So it's not going to be a Howey test issue. It's not going to be an SEC issue. Not a lawyer. But I've been working in the space with tokens for quite a while, and I feel like that's pretty much.
I'm sure they'll need to have a certain percentage of the supply going to contributors, though, because otherwise people will be like, "Oh, we'll give 1% to the contributors and 90% to the project founder and the team." It's like, I don't know about that. I'm sure they'll come up with some.
There's always someone who's going to try and bend the rules in a way that's just a no, and then they'll be made an example of probably. But I think the Howey test is. I think it's pretty mature at this stage, and I think most people understand where the line in the sand is. Let's put it like that.
That's true. Gary Gensler didn't know, but I think that's true.
I think he chose to be. Yeah, that whole thing was absolutely insane. Let's not go down that. I could climb on
go down that road. All right, 375 AI. So we're going to talk about some sensor categories. Sensor category here. 375 AI is, I think, going to be a behemoth in the space. their founder, Harry Dewhurst, guy is, I mean, if you want to have someone leading your project, he's the guy. So I think he's still in his upper 30s, but he was on Forbes 30 under 30. I believe he sold his first business that he co-founded for like $380 million. And they got into DePIN with helium, and they became deployers, him and his business partner. And they decided we should just do our own thing in DePIN. And that's exactly what they're doing here. So as you're seeing, their flagship hardware has 6 cameras. They have NVIDIA chips at the edge that's processing all the data at the edge. And they are then they're able to basically take that data, make it actionable. The other part that's really important to point out here is they have an exclusive partnership with Outfront Media that has over 50,000 billboards across the country in high traffic areas. So they're setting up all this data collection. They've already scanned, I think it was 50 million vehicles. I saw a milestone, maybe it's 50 million or 500 million vehicles. And they've started deploying these in LA. They're now deploying in, I think Austin. I know they're purposely going after cities with ports to start with. I know that's what Harry said. And this data is incredibly valuable. You look at like even hedge funds, for example, they pay an arm and a leg just for satellite imagery of retail locations to see how many cars in a parking lot. This, you can see what cars are going past, what types of cars, how many people are in the cars, etc. I know it's a little big brother, but frankly, someone was going to do it, and I do think that they're going to be able to really monetize this data in a big way. Something that I didn't realize until I interviewed Harry. I have an interview with him on my channel as well. 80% of commerce is still done in physical locations. So only 20% is actually done online. So that's a huge blind spot. And that's something that they are looking to fill that blind spot. So they also have other hardware coming out. They have, if you're like someone that's very hands-on, it's going to be called 375 Street. So it's 2 cameras, and you can actually deploy that in your region. So it's not going to go on one of these billboards, and that kind of fills in the gaps on the data for them. And they also have a 375 Go app on your phone that can basically test signal connectivity around the world. And they have the amount of data they collected there is massive. So they just had their token sale on CoinList to the public a couple days ago, but their actual TGE, their token launch, should be happening later this month. So that's one to keep an eye on, the ETH token.
Yeah, one of the things I like dug into when I was looking at these guys was, or one of the things that I think is cool is the traffic flow optimization stuff, where they're looking at, like if you're looking at how busy particular streets are or whatever, that at certain times, like for city planners or whatever, would be able to potentially, or even just for, mapping apps, things that are helping people get from A to B. I just thought that was super interesting. So yeah, I think it's like, it's all kind of, I suppose it's anonymized in the sense that they wouldn't know necessarily who an individual is, but they could tell you like what's the quickest way to get home, etc. So I don't know. I thought that was pretty cool, and I think this is definitely a project to watch for sure. I will definitely be scooping up a bag.
Absolutely, yeah. I'm super excited about them launching their token. We have WeatherXM there, so WeatherXM, you deploy weather stations around the world. They've got a few different hardware options, but as you see, they've got pretty good coverage. When it comes to weather, especially hyperlocal weather, we're seeing more and more privatized collection of weather data. To this point, it's been largely subsidized by government. And the problem is, for emerging countries, especially, they don't have the weather data that the US has, for example. So the 7-day forecast in the US is as good as the 1-day forecast in many emerging countries. And the problem with that is the vast majority of agriculture, a large percentage, is in these countries that don't have any weather data. Yeah. And you'd think like, yes, that makes farming difficult, but the bigger issue is they can't get crop insurance. So a lot of these, these farmers in some of these countries, just are going uninsured. And as we see more and more weather events, we're seeing that the crops are getting destroyed once every 5 years now, and that can be the livelihood of a lot of these farmers around the world. So that is something that they're based out of Greece, the WeatherXM team. They are getting these stations deployed in a lot of these countries where it's really needed, and they have programs where you can actually invest into the hardware, and they do the deployments, kind of like what we're seeing with a lot of these projects to get the deployments in the areas that it's needed. So I think WeatherXM, it's been around for a long time. Market cap's pretty damn low right now. I do believe that that's certainly a project that can have a major comeback. And I do have a bag in that as well. Solid team too. Hive Mapper on this list. They've mapped 36% of the world's roads. They just launched, or they just closed a $32 million investment round, put a dash cam in your car. They're using that data to train autonomous vehicle models. I actually host their quarterly AMA, so I'm going to host that in a couple of weeks with Ariel, their CEO. I built out a fleet with Hive Mapper myself. They just launched a new model. I think we're going to see other projects try to duplicate. Instead of having to buy their hardware up front, a $600 dash cam, they've now launched a $19 a month plan in conjunction with Helium Mobile, actually. So instead of having to buy their hardware up front, for $19 a month, they ship you the dash cam. It has a Helium Mobile SIM card in it. And if that thing's plugged in, you don't have to connect to your phone anymore. You just put it in your window. It collects the data using the Helium Mobile plan. It uploads all that data. So pretty freaking awesome, man. And they also, if you already have their dash cam, the B, the newer one, you can get access to a $10 per month Helium Mobile plan through their partnership with Hive Mapper now. So very passive, and they have a number of Web2 customers. They have Volkswagen buying the data. They have Lyft buying the data. The list goes on there. So Hive Mapper's done quite well on the fundamental side. Token price has been severely lagging. I will say they had a lot of emissions early on, but most of the unlocks are out of the way now, so that you shouldn't see any massive growth in the circulating supply at this point. So that's something that certainly bodes well for them. What else we got on here? Wingbits flight tracking network. So Wingbits is a really cool project. So within the last few years, they used to use radar for tracking flights. They now have something called ADS-B, which is basically a requirement for pretty much every developed country at this point, where all flights have to send out a signal that's kind of a digital snapshot of the flight, with not only the flight number and the details of the plane, but also the altitude, how fast it's moving, etc. So you have a lot more granular data on these flight paths versus just radar. So the problem is you have to collect that data. Now, what's wild is, to this point, it's been kind of hobbyist. So there's these networks that are monetizing the data, and then people that are flight enthusiasts, they'll send hardware out to, and they do it for free to get access to the flight tracking data. The problem with that, though, is there's really no financial incentive for them to make sure they have an optimized setup, or that they have good uptime, for example. Wingbits is flipping the script there. So using a token incentive model, again, people have an incentive to have a good deployment, optimize that deployment, put it up high on the roof, make sure they have good uptime, et cetera, and are capturing really good data. So this data is really valuable. It saves airlines a lot of money. They can optimize their staff better. They can optimize their gate space better. That's one of the biggest expenses for airlines today is renting out gate space. And the other thing is, flight delays cost these airlines a tremendous amount of money. So on top of that, they can also optimize flight paths better, right? So there's a lot of reasons why this data is valuable, and I think they're going to their goal is to build out the most valuable data set. They also launched a satellite recently to get better data when they're crossing oceans and stuff. You don't have the data capture on the ground there, so pretty cool stuff. What's that?
I was going to ask about that because, and correct me if I'm wrong, but the reason I think this is really cool is because my understanding of how it used to work, and again, this is just to look at it from the future, like how it used to work, you were saying before about radar, right? So essentially a plane would take off and it would be seen by the airport taking off, and then it would essentially disappear except for when it would come across another plane along the route and they would be aware of each other. But it would essentially disappear, and then it would land when it, it would reappear when it came into the scope of the radar at the other end where it's supposed to land. So if a plane went missing, if it just didn't arrive for some reason, like you wouldn't necessarily even know until a certain amount of time went by and they're like, shit, that plane should have arrived. Where is it? Like, oh, it must have crashed into a mountain or whatever. So
yeah, it's crazy to think about. That's how we tracked flights up until really a handful of years ago. I mean, that's the technology that was used for a long time.
Right.
And you really didn't have much data. The other thing is, by the way, their hardware it works in conjunction with GeoNet. This is another one, okay, that uses the GeoNet network for anti-spoofing. So you know that the hardware is in the correct location. But they also have the ability to track drone flights in the future. And we're going to see more and more drones out there. So that's another use case.
If we arrive at a place where you can get a drone taxi to literally land in your back garden and take you from somewhere, it necessitates, just for airspace control, it necessitates you being able to know much more granularly than simply near an air traffic control tower, which might be, could be anywhere. You can't be having drones crashing into each other all the time. So, like obviously that would be a disaster. So I just think this is a really cool project.
Yeah, it's gonna be great. We're already at the point now where drones are starting to deliver packages like that. That's here. Okay. Yeah. And then it's that airspace issue. You have to be able to track these drones. So this is gonna be big. And I do have an interview with Robin as well, their founder, on my channel.
Sorry, the best part of all this is that I'm not sure it's possible to do that in a centralized way, because you'd have to get, the technology is moving so fast, you'd have to get all the governments to agree on a set of standards, like such and such a type of vehicle can fly at such a height and all that, which they'll do, I'm sure, anyway. But, the power of decentralization is that, it can happen really quickly because you can get everybody involved and everybody can have a share of whatever money is in it, essentially.
For sure. I mean, the way they've tracked them before Wingbits was decentralized. Again, like these centralized companies just sent the hardware out to hobbyists that put it on their roofs.
Yeah,
but they weren't getting any capture of that revenue. I mean, they were literally just like, hey, stick this hardware up and we'll give you the ability to track flights. I mean, that was their incentive. So it's been done in a decentralized way, kind of. There's just been centralized entities controlling all the revenue. Now that's being shared, which is pretty freaking cool. Let's see the last one here. Silencio. So Silencio is making a move for robotics too, but this has been, it's a free app you download. You can capture, they started with noise pollution data, which is actually very valuable in and of itself. I mean, if you look in Europe, there are a lot of studies about how bad noise pollution is for your health. They haven't really paid a lot of attention to that in the US yet, but it's a pretty sizable market. But I think they're looking to capture a larger market and use the audio they're capturing to train robotics on from an audio standpoint. It's an interesting pivot for them. I think it makes sense. I think robotics again is going to do quite well. I think they also there's some rumors they might be launching some hardware too that you can maybe plug in public spaces to capture data as well. But I think their market cap's pretty low. I think they had a nice little run over the last few months, so it's interesting for sure.
We had them on the show actually a little while ago. It's very interesting to hear that. Hear what they've been up to. Noise pollution isn't something that you would necessarily think of, like the average person would think of on a daily basis, unless they're being annoyed by, a neighborhood alarm going off nonstop or whatever. But it does make a difference. As someone who used to live in the city and moved out to the countryside, I can tell you, your body goes through a de-stress straight away just when you don't have to listen to that sort of ambient cars and traffic and
this actually covered this one time. It says noise pollution not only drives hearing loss, tinnitus, hypersensitivity to sound, but can cause or exacerbate cardiovascular disease, type 2 diabetes, sleep disturbances, stress, mental health, cognition problems, memory impairment, attention deficits. I mean, it goes on and on. Yeah, we haven't done that many studies in the U.S. on it, but Europe is of course ahead of the game there, and it's very detrimental to your health. There was a story not long ago. There's a Bitcoin mining farm that was in close proximity to this neighborhood, and people were like became ill because it was so loud. So
Right.
there's certainly something there.
Yeah. All right, let's keep cracking on. Energy next.
I'll let you lead that off. I actually have, I know Sourceful is one of the top revenue producing projects, and they're in the solar industry. I have one D-Charge I want to talk about too, but I'll let you lead this off.
Sure. Okay, so again, we have had a few guests from this space over the last, I guess, 5 or 6 months. But yeah, I think it's a relatively emerging, like the DePIN part, right? Obviously, all electricity could be decentralized or centralized. Mostly it's centralized at the moment, but of course, people have solar panels and, are contributing back to the grid, and which in a way is decentralized energy production. So, but when it comes to DePIN and the future there are definitely some very interesting things happening. So Sourceful Energy are essentially developing decentralized virtual power plants. So they aggregate energy resources such as solar panels, batteries, electric vehicles, that kind of thing. And participants can connect their devices to the network using hardware or a mobile app. And then they can contribute surplus energy and provide grid balancing services. That's the kind of idea, I guess. In return, they earn rewards as well as obviously whatever the electricity is worth. And they have they haven't launched their token yet. I don't think it's coming up. I think it's going to be on Solana. Again, don't quote me on that one. But yeah, that's sort of what they're up to. I think the token launch might be next year, but you want to do your homework on that one. It is an interesting project. Let me just see if I pull up their website. Let me share this. There we go. Why is that not working? All right. Yeah. So, I like their marketing. Your power, your rules. So again, I think I definitely think it's worth doing an episode completely focused on energy, because I think like energy and is just going to be so important in the coming decades as we move more and more towards AI and robotics, all these things that are going to just require an enormous amount of power. So, and then moving on to Arcrene. This one is, again, kind of Web3 powered network for connecting and monetizing distributed renewable energy resources. It just allows you to connect your green energy assets, again, such as solar panels, etc. So let me just pull up their website. Yeah, again, these guys are more kind of focused on green energy, I guess. But yeah, connecting global renewable energy to the on-chain economy. So again, trying to bridge that gap between renewable energy sources and the Web3 kind of world, I guess. Part of the token, the idea of the token, as I understand it, is to provide verifiable proof of the green energy. So at the moment, that whole system, and again, I don't want to go too far down this rabbit hole because it is definitely a rabbit hole we could go down about carbon credits and offsets and all that, all these kind of, let's call them legacy systems. I really think we could do a better job with Web3, and that's why I kind of feel like these guys are probably, they could be a play in that direction of, trying to just, I guess, Web3 enable that whole side of things for a much better outcome. So if renewable energy is important to you, that's definitely one you might want to have a look at. Power Ledger, I'll have a look at this one. Power Ledger is an interesting one. I'm just going to pull up there. Sorry, I should have had these websites ready.
You're good. Yeah, this area is not really my expertise, which is interesting because I spent 14 years working in the solar industry, so I know renewables very well. I just have not really dug into the Web3 side of it, frankly. So this is an area I need to do a little bit more research to wrap my head around the intersection there.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I just think, I just think if every house, like I live in Ireland, right? And in Ireland, I could put enough solar panels on my roof to pay for my bills year round. Like there's enough space on the roof to do that. So if I can do it here, there's probably 3/4 of the world that could do a much better job based solely on the amount of sun that's available. Now I know the new panels work a bit differently, etc. But I just feel like, this is like for me the ultimate in decentralized tech, basically. Do we need coal plants at all? If everybody had solar panels, I don't know.
I mean, it's always been an issue of how much electric costs, right? I mean, I always train my sales reps. So I manage like a 10-state territory for a solar manufacturer and was responsible for training the reps and working with business owners on strategy. And the biggest competitor is not other solar companies, it's the utility. And what we're seeing is the rise in utility costs in the US in particular. We saw inflation, and this is what I train on my reps on, is like, we haven't seen it in the electric costs yet because utilities have to prove that their costs have gone up. And then they have to go ask for rate increases from the Public Service Commission. And that's exactly what we've seen now. We're seeing electric costs skyrocket. The AI movement is adding to that. So I think solar is going to make more and more sense from a financial perspective as utility costs continue to climb. And then in areas where maybe like you didn't get enough sunlight in the past, now it doesn't matter. You can still make the financial side of it make sense.
Yeah, well, I mean, and here, obviously, every country deals with their power and the way the utilities work differently. Here, all of our utilities have gone up. They're just going up multiple times a year lately.
Mm-hmm.
I agree. We reach a point where everybody just goes, you know what? And actually, the solar business is booming here.
Mm-hmm.
More and more, you drive down the street and you see more and more houses. So I'm sure it's the same everywhere in Europe, especially in places like Spain where they had that huge centralized power problem last year, or was it this year? A little while ago. Anyway, Power Ledger. These guys are trying to deal with that issue that I spoke about before about carbon offsets. So these guys have been around for a while. I think they were set up in 2016, if I remember correctly. They're going on 10 years in existence. It's one of the earliest projects in the space. And again, the platform allows peer-to-peer energy trading, allowing consumers with solar panels to sell excess electricity directly to their neighbors. It also provides solutions for trading environmental commodities like RECs, which are renewable energy certificates. Again, they're trying to democratize the energy market, shifting the power away from centralized utilities to individual consumers and producers, or prosumers if you prefer. It's like most things, if the power market gets more decentralized, it becomes more resilient, more efficient. Lower costs for consumers, accelerates renewable energy adoption, etc., etc. Better for humanity is the sort of bottom line. Even if you don't believe in global warming because of fossil fuels, it's still better. Still better for humanity if we're not burning coal and polluting the sky, even if it's just because you get a better tan. That's those guys. They ICO'd in 2017, which is wild when you think about it.
It's been around the block a little bit.
Yeah, OGs. So then we have Energy Web. These guys, sorry, let me just pull up their website. It's energyweb.org. Yeah, again, look, there's a lot of kind of overlap in these projects in the energy space. I think I think the Web3 and particularly the DePIN aspect of it is possibly somewhat kind of nascent. It's also tricky. It's a tricky space to operate in because of like really entrenched incumbents and a lot of government control in most geographies. But Energy Web is a non-profit, global. They're building open source systems. Their website isn't loading for me for some reason. Is that my internet? Yeah, there we go.
There it is.
So, yeah, they're, again, I'm a fan of their marketing. They blockchain tailored for energy, secured by major energy companies acting as validators. Platform provides a digital spine for the energy industry, enabling secure data exchange, asset identity management, and the development of decentralized applications for e-mobility, clean energy tracking, and grid flexibility. So yeah, again, if you're interested in this stuff, we'll deep dive on these a bit more later on. But yeah, these guys are kind of a leader in the enterprise and utility adoption of blockchain for energy applications. So they have over 100 major energy sector participants, and it's open source public standards. So it's kind of I think it's positioned really well. What that means for tokens, etc., is anybody's guess. They do have a token. Let's see, do I have it here? No. So I'm not sure if that means it's just not on a centralized exchange. So in any case, that's them. And grid singularity, to move on to the last one. Yeah, these guys are kind of, let's see, I'll just put up the website.
The EWT token for that last one, like I remember that thing has had some major runs up, but it's still sitting at almost just under a $25 million market cap.
Right. Where is it? Where can you buy it at the moment?
Let's see. Looks like Gate, KuCoin,
okay,
CoinX, Kraken. So some big major exchanges. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So yeah, these guys, grid aware energy markets. Yes, look, I just include these because of their foundational role in the energy space. They were a co-founder of Energy Web, and have a kind of a focus on the critical but overlooked area of the market design and simulation. So open source tools that are kind of essential for the practical implementation of decentralized energy, or a decentralized energy future, let's say. Yeah, they're co-founded by Energy Web, the Energy Web Foundation, and the Green Blockchain Technology Company, developing, again, open decentralized energy data exchange, a platform for data exchange. So data is the new oil. And yeah, in the energy market, I guess that's probably as important as in any market, really, because knowing what's going on, being able to cater for demand there are a unique set of challenges in that with energy grids. It's why less developed countries have brownouts all the time, et cetera, et cetera. It's tricky. Electricity is somewhat tricky. So yeah, again, peer-to-peer energy trading, future smart grids, et cetera, et cetera. So we'll do a deeper dive on these. Conscious of the fact that we've been online for an hour and a half, and we still have
get there.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5 categories to go. So I think we should probably speed up a little bit.
Yeah.
So yeah. Okay. Storage, data storage. Do you want to run us through these? I mean, our Weaver.
Yeah, I'll buzz through them. And by the way, I have that decharge just real quickly that I do want to look further into, because I do have an EV. I can tell you at least the infrastructure in the US it can be rough. So this gives you ability to like deploy charging stations, and I believe that actually you can crowdsource into charging stations to do like a revenue share, because they basically, these charging stations have an arbitrage, right? You pay 12 cents for energy, they charge 48 cents depending on the time of day, sometimes more than others, but very interesting for sure. I have the webpage. I don't know if you can pull that up or not, but
sorry, yeah.
No, you get. So this one is interesting to me. I just look further into the token itself. They show some examples with the revenue share, but this is one that I'm particularly interested in because I know there's a need for it, at least in the U.S. Like our charging infrastructure is nowhere near where it needs to be.
I don't think anybody's is. I mean, EV sales are been rock solid for a good while now. So, there's more and more EV. China's trying to buy the EV market with subsidized like BYD cars that are ridiculous value and really, really good technology wise. So we're just going to need more and more of these stations. Actually, these D-Charge guys were on the show on the DePIN Coffee Hour before. Really interesting project. It should have been on this list, really. So shout out to D-Charge.
Yeah, the G-Charge is awesome, man. All right, the storage side of things. Let's move on over. Guys, Arweave is my top storage play. I couldn't believe that it had the drop off it had in this last, that last flash crash. I want to say it got down to like $1.50, and that's lower than we saw in the bottom of the last bear market. So that for anyone that hopped on that, congratulations. Arweave is, it got down. I think it wicked all the way down to, I saw it to $1.50 at one point. Insane.
Yeah.
Absolutely insane.
From July last year, where it was $28,
kind
of down to $4.30 it's just at such a discount right now.
I agree. So they do permanent storage. It's a very unique model, but you pay one time up front, and then your file is essentially stored and immutable on the blockchain for forever. Okay, so I think they model out for like 100 or 200 years, and obviously storage costs have been driven down over time. But you have, I think, 30 different blockchains storing their data on Arweave. You have 85% of NFT collections on Solana storing their data on Arweave. They also launched AO, which is like a supercomputer essentially built on top of Arweave. Yeah, so it's the permanent layer or the permanent storage network. So AO is essentially a supercomputer built on top of this permanent storage architecture. And then you have Ario, which I got my little Ario elephant here. It's like Ario. So Ario is kind of like the indexer. So you can think about Arweave as the library of permanent storage. Ario is like the librarian that you can index everything you need to. And AO is basically the supercomputer built on top that you can leverage that infrastructure. So that's an ecosystem to me that's being very slept on. The fact that it dropped in that flash crash, man, unfortunately it's available on like coin or crypto.com. It's not on like Coinbase or anything, but that's one that I tried to get some money over to crypto.com. I couldn't do it fast enough, man. Like you're never prepared for a flash crash like that, black swan event that, well, it's never happened quite like that. So it's hard to be prepared for that. But
are you talking about the AO token?
Well, Arweave token, and then AO, you have to use a decentralized exchange. I actually have a tutorial on my YouTube channel on how to transfer.
Arweave is on Binance, and which I wouldn't use at the moment. Bybit, OKX, BitGetGate, Maxi, KuCoin.
Yeah. So for us in the US, we have very limited availability of those different exchanges. I think crypto.com is like the most accessible one in the US, right. I'll say. And a lot of those they require like KYC now. So you used to be able to use a VPN. You can't do that so much anymore with a lot of the exchanges outside of the US. But yeah, I mean, Arweave.
There's a category coming up in a minute that might be useful to you.
What's that?
There's a category that might be coming up in a minute that could be useful to you.
That's true.
VPN category.
That's true. Filecoin, guys, has been around a long time. There's a lot of The amount of data being stored in Filecoin is crazy. A lot of projects are using them as their storage infrastructure at this point. I think it makes sense. I mean, if you can get away from the centralized entities, I think it makes a lot of sense. There's a lot of projects built on top of Filecoin. So, the problem for them, when you look at the last market cycles, they had a lot of dilution. And that kind of worked against their token price, unfortunately. But fundamentally, it's very strong. Storage is another one, older project that's been around for probably 8 years, I imagine. But they're another decentralized storage project. And I don't know much about Crust Network, actually. I don't know if you can speak to that one.
Yeah, just before speaking to that, Filecoin and storage are actually both DePINs that are available through Havelo. So if you've got Havelo, you can contribute to those projects by storing.
That's awesome.
By being a node essentially for them. I think Filecoin, I don't have the details of this, and you know what, we'll dig into it actually on another show when we deal specifically with storage, but Filecoin have done some sort of a pivot recently, I believe. So more to know there, I would say. Yeah, look, I mean, as far as Crust goes, and I don't want to, again, these are, look, at the bottom, at the end of the day, most of these technologies and what they do is store stuff. So you run a node, you're storing little pieces of the data that somebody uploads to their service. So if, for example, it's a drive, like a Google Drive alternative, then, and you upload a photo, then that photo is going to get broken down into loads of little different bits, and they're going to be stored all over nodes in redundancy. And when you request the file, it's going to get pulled from all of those nodes so that you can get a similar type of experience, but in a decentralized way. So yeah, that's kind of I think that's probably a fairly simplistic 10,000-foot view of what these storage networks do. Most of them, they all kind of, they're all going for different sides of the market. Maybe some are going for enterprise solutions, some are going for retail. They've got different protocols around, how they build their redundancy, how the files are stored, but fundamentally, they all do the same thing, which is that they store data for whatever their particular application, their flavor of application is. So just in an attempt to speed things up a little bit, that's kind of like the very high level view of what these storage players do. Why that's important? Data is the new oil. Everything is data in a world where we're existing in a decentralized online electronic way. So if you think about it, like literally every single thing that you do when you interact with anything online is a request for data and the data getting sent back. Whether you're playing a computer game, streaming video, asking an AI a question, consulting with your AI psychiatrist, et cetera, et cetera. So I kind of think that's the long story short on that.
For sure. I actually have below I have the list of networks you guys are integrated into. I think that's worthwhile pulling up.
Sure.
Recently, I have a Nosana on there. We'll talk about the GPU compute projects in a second, but the storage is on there. So I believe there's more, actually. I think you guys have a total of is it 14 or is it 12 now?
No, we have 11 at the moment. They are working on the team are always assessing networks.
Sure.
They've in the lab, they're always working on what's involved with integrating next projects, etc. Because obviously there's an orchestration layer as well, right? We can't just you're not going to run all 11 networks on your machine. Doesn't matter how powerful it is, it's just not going to do a good job. So
I wonder which one we're missing, because there's only 10 on this picture. I don't know. But either way, it's pretty cool. I mean, you just connect to their network. Filecoin's not there, yeah.
Yeah, but I think Filecoin is not there because they've done some pivot, so they're not actually paying rewards anymore for storage. But again, I don't want to speak out of turn. I'm not exactly sure the details. I just heard that there was some pivot, so I need to check into that, and we can talk about it in more detail when we deal with them.
Sounds good.
When we do a data storage episode, So compute resources, I guess. So this is GPU compute.
Love it.
I mean, I feel like this is where all the money is at the moment in DePIN mining, especially if you're providing resources. I feel like the biggest paychecks are coming from GPU mining. Would you agree with that? Or?
Yeah, I think so for GPU mining. Yeah, I believe that is true, and I think that's also where like a lot of the major revenue is in DePIN today. Again, I think robotics is going to give them a run for their money, but man, some of these networks are generating some serious revenue. If you like Render
Sure.
Network is kind of the most well-known one, I want to say. They actually. So I was at the Las Vegas Sphere for a show on New Year's Eve, and I found out after the fact it was powered by Render Network. So pretty cool stuff. So these networks I think are going to be really, really important. You even have Scott Bessent, the Treasury Secretary, talking about how decentralized compute is and with blockchain is going to be really important. One of the things we talked about is the electric grid, right? Now you have, with the China situation, they're holding back rare earth minerals. You can't get ships to build out these data centers. We're going to have to tap into the compute that's sitting idle. And there's a lot of compute at the edge that's not being utilized today. That's what these projects are doing. So, Render Network is obviously one of the better known ones. So they're kind of acting as the Uber or the Lyft for connecting people that have compute resources. When you say Upwork or Fiverr or whatever, compute resources with people that need them. So certainly a big use case there. Their team is like crazy though. I don't know if I'm trying to see if I can pull up their team. About Us, maybe. Yeah.
I mean, I bought some Render in I want to say like 2020, maybe 2021. So like last cycle, basically. They've been around for a while, and like, yeah, these guys are serious.
It's actually insane. Like Jules Urbach's the founder. He's known as like the godfather of rendering. You've Ari Emanuel, CEO and Endeavor, owns the WWF. J.J. Abrams, I mean, that guy has like directed Star Wars movies. Yeah. You have Brandon Ike, founder of Brave Software. Mike Winkleman, you probably know him as Beeple, the NFT artist. Jennifer Scott's on the, I think, World Economic Forum. Yeah. So their team is incredibly stacked. They've obviously been around for a while. They're very well known. A Cash Network is making some waves. So they have revenue coming through for sure. They recently are redoing their tokenomics so that they can become net deflationary, kind of like what Helium's done. If you read through the documentation, they used Helium as an inspiration for changing this. They're also announced like yesterday they're leaving Cosmos, and they're looking for a new chain. In the document I read, Solana is a likely scenario for them.
Right.
And they got hit pretty hard with this recent pullback. So we're close. I mean, I put a video out on them like 2 years ago on my channel. I think it was at like 50 cents. So they're getting close to where they were at the bottom of the bear market. And this is a legit project. So between their tokenomics change and
they are 100% legit. I met those guys when at a Cosmos event, actually, Cosmoverse event in Colombia, I want to say 2023 or 2022. They're really on it. Like they're always, I don't know, they just feel like they've got commercial smarts as well as tech smarts, let's put it like that. And a lot of Cosmos, like Cosmos is an awesome ecosystem, but there's a huge element that's kind of very anti-commercialism. It's very like, almost if you're in that space, if you're a project in there, they will absolutely crucify you if they feel like you're trying to make profit, basically, almost. It feels like that anyway when you're on the ground here. So, and it's not everybody, but there's definitely some loud voices in that space that make it very difficult to be massively successful, in my opinion, or at least that's been my experience. Did they say why they're leaving?
They basically said there's something with the security side of it that hasn't been upgraded in 6 years. They had their parting words, official tweet put up by their founder was basically like, look, we appreciate Cosmos for everything they've done. We have nothing bad to say about them. But this is something we've seen now with a number of projects. You have GeoNet started on Polygon. You had Demo started on Polygon. Helium started their own chain. A lot of them are going to go to a chain like Solana. Solana, I speak with Mike Horton pretty regularly, the founder of GeoNet, and he's like, look, Solana's been great. They help us out. They want us to succeed. The liquidity is there. By the way, if you own GeoNet tokens on Polygon, you have like a couple days, 1 or 2 days left to bridge them over to Solana to take advantage of a bonus token bonus they have going out for bridging your assets over. I think that ends maybe tomorrow. So Solana Foundation's been really instrumental. And if you look at Solana's page, they have a page dedicated to DePIN, and GeoNet's integrated into the Seeker phone. But yeah, everyone I know that's switched over to Solana has had nothing but great things to say. And I think there is something to be said about going to the chain that has the liquidity, right? And where a lot of builders are building. Base is the other one, that we're seeing a lot of projects move to. So I think Base and Solana and me are going to be like the two main DePIN chains.
Yeah.
And then a lot of them also have some access to Peak as well. Not normally like their only chain, but they normally have Peak as like an additional chain. But to me, Solana and Base are the two. So that just was announced yesterday for a cash. To me, fundamentally, they're strong, revamping their tokenomics. So it's better for token holders. The move away from Cosmos, I think all that bodes well for them. Flux, go ahead.
I was just going to say, maybe we should, rather than digging into everything about every project, because we're just we'll be here until noon your time and about 10 p.m. my time. Do you want to just maybe give people an overview of what they all do that's common and why it's going to affect the future?
Yeah, I don't know DeepBrain or Fluence that much, but I can speak to Flux. I mean, guys, they're decentralizing compute, so you can look at it as a decentralized AWS. They normally are more cost effective. Their security generally is I think in many ways can be better. You don't have to deal with one single point of failure, like when AWS has outages and it cripples businesses. You don't have to deal with that. So I think Flux has a lot of Web2 customers. They're doing a lot of big things, have had a lot of good changes. But yeah, so I think that's what these three to the right are doing, are more so a decentralized AWS, if you will. The left is really GPU projects for inferencing, mostly AI, I would say.
Yeah, and the benefit, I suppose, for anybody listening is that, decentralization means that you have an opportunity to share in some of the profits, basically. So anybody can get involved and potentially share in some of the profits that the most profitable companies in the world, Amazon, Google, Microsoft, these are all these massive technology companies. They're making, well, their balance sheets are very healthy. Let's put it like that. So rather than all of that concentration of power and wealth, these guys are all giving, it's kind of like a win-win-win, right? Because they're giving everybody, all of us normal folk, a chance to participate and get just a tiny piece of that pie. And then also on the other side, for the customers, it's the costs are much lower. So power to the people.
For sure. What else we got here? We got a couple more categories, right? They should be.
Yeah, we've got a bunch.
Okay. So we kind of already touched on a couple of these. The one I want to, I'll focus on here. So, IONET, a cache, render network, all GPU networks. They're great they're fully decentralized. They're aggregating GPUs from all over the world. They're great for inferencing AI models, which is, that's going to be a big, we've been training models, now inferencing and interacting with the models will be big. Exabits is a little bit differentiated. They're going to have their token launch this quarter. And they're building out legitimate data centers. So I just want to pull this up and then we can kind of move on.
Sure.
Let me share my screen here because they are quite different from the rest. And I haven't seen really anyone talk about exhibits. That's and I don't know why. Here, I just shared my screen there. I don't know if you can pull that up. But you can see they have data centers, legitimate data centers they're building out all over the world, in Europe, Asia, North America. In some cases, they have thousands of high-end GPUs. They even have access to the new Blackwell chips. But the other thing I want to call out more than anything is, these other projects are great for inferencing. But if you want to actually train models and fine-tune models for like Web 2, institutional purposes, you need to have more compute resources, and that's what Exhibits has. So you notice Render, a cache network, Aether. List goes on. They even partnered with Nosana recently. They're all actually pulling compute resources from these data centers when their networks themselves don't have enough compute resources to meet the demands of a potential client, they can turn to exabytes to get really the high-end compute. So that is why
concentrated juice.
Yeah, exactly. So there are certain use cases you have to have more concentrated compute to be able to carry out certain use cases, right?
Can I ask you a question about that then? And for fear of going down a rabbit hole, if they're just, how are they decentralized if they have essentially centralized data centers? Like, in what way does that?
I would say it's more of a hybrid, but it's decentralized in the way that, in the sense that when their token's launched, they're going to be able to fractionalize ownership into these data centers. Okay, so that's the main thing, and kind of a revenue share. So it's a way for you to fractionalize ownership in tokenized compute, right? So I'd say that's really how it's decentralized. Now, the other thing is, like, AWS, and I don't want to go too far into the weeds here, but in AWS, if you have a data center like in Texas, they have a lot of data centers that are built out in major ways in very specific areas. If you have customers in other parts of the world, you all of a sudden have latency you got to worry about. Whereas with Exabits, they are more decentralized in that they have their data centers more spread out. So you can access, a data center that's closer in proximity to reduce latency, which for certain use cases is really important.
Right.
So I'd say they're more decentralized in that way, and that they're more spread out with their data centers than a lot of the centralized entities.
But if a data center goes on fire, someone's going to get a phone call.
Yeah.
It's not going to be 1,000 fractionalized token holders of the data center. I don't know. That's an interesting one. We'll definitely, again, we'll do a deep dive on all these projects. And if anybody listening is like highly ticked off with us for not including your favorite project in this list or in any of the category lists, let us know. Tell us. Like, we don't know everything. We'd love to find out about new projects, or come on the particular show and say, oh, we're going to deal with GPUs, and actually we really screwed up last time. We didn't mention this awesome project, which we should have. So do let us know in the comments. All right, will we crack on, or do you want to talk about BitTensor?
If you want to talk about BitTensor, you can. I know Tile is probably like one of the largest market caps of all the DePIN projects. I don't know if you want to. We can cover it if you want to, or we can move on. I know we're getting
it's, again, AI community-owned marketplace. It's decentralized machine learning, essentially. So they've been around for a while. Let's see, 50 active. As of September 2025, they've got 50 active subnets and support over 141,000 accounts. It's a pretty ambitious project. And it extends quite a bit beyond, just GPU power. So they're trying to actually decentralize AI itself. So again, we'll dig into that on the particular show, but that's definitely a really good project, and Tau is a token definitely worth keeping an eye on. Let's get into bandwidth and content delivery.
All right. The main one I'll talk about here is Streamer, but I think they're all very similar. Streamer is a peer-to-peer network. So as opposed to, let's say you have a sensor in your car, for example, because we use Demo then. But if you have a sensor in your car, instead of sending your data to a centralized server with AWS in Texas, and then them sharing that to other peers in the network, you kind of remove that centralized entity, and instead you just send the data through peers in the network. So Demo is one where you can, each vehicle is kind of sharing its data. So you'd send your data to 4 more vehicles, they send it to 4 more vehicles, and you kind of have this like spiderweb effect where you don't have to send data through any centralized entity. So they've built out this peer-to-peer data sharing network. They also have Streamer TV now, same deal, where you can actually stream video through a peer-to-peer network. So pretty cool stuff what they're doing.
I believe we could be doing this show on Streamer at some point. Maybe Mark will encourage us to do that.
For sure. I do live streams almost every day, and covering like all the crypto news. I'm just kind of waiting. I hope that they integrate into StreamYard, because that's generally what I use. That's what we're using today. And that allows me to stream to all my different platforms. So I'm kind of waiting for them to get more accessibility there.
Right.
But great project nonetheless. And I think a lot of these are doing kind of the same. They're doing similar things.
Yeah, 100%. I think Theta is one worth noting. That's our most recent integration into Havelo. Funnily enough, they have a couple of different arms to what they're doing as well. And again, I think that's a really interesting project. So if you're into that kind of thing, then take a look at that, because they have T-Fuel and Theta, a few things like that. So much more cost efficient and decentralized. So anyways, we'll dig into these in more detail in another episode. But yeah, Streamer, Orchid, Mason, I don't actually know a lot about them. Fleek, and Theta. Could also have Mysterium in there. That's a bit of a contentious one, though. So it's really good. I don't know. Mysterium have a really, really good tokenomics. I mean, their token price is just the same. It's like it's nailed to the chart.
The stablecoin.
Yeah, stablecoin. Yeah. I think that leaves us just with MedTech. This is one that's kind of interesting to me on a personal level, I suppose. And we just had so there's a few projects in here. Again, not to be confused with, we're looking at this from the DePIN side of things, but there's just a huge overlap between decentralized technology and decentralized networks, which is what DePIN is about. So I don't mind blurring that line a little bit. In this case, these projects are all DePIN, or have an aspect of DePIN. So BitDoctor is a super interesting one. They have they've developed a kind of a mobile app that allows you to scan your face, and from that scan, it can tell you whether you're going to have diabetes or die of cancer in the next whatever. I don't know. I'm being facetious. But the long and the short of it is basically you just you don't even actually use the camera. It uses the sensor that's in there, and it can detect a whole bunch of stuff. So it's kind of proactive health, let's call it, or wellness. And then that data all goes into their back end system. So that's kind of thing. The founder is a really smart guy. We interviewed him on the show a little while ago. So there's a DePIN coffee hour with BitDoctor. You can have a look at that. I'm sure we'll get him back on when it's time, based out of Singapore. So when it's time to do this particular niche. And the rest are kind of somewhat similar. I feel like Rejuve.ai and Reflex, we had those on as well on a show just two or 3 weeks ago. Very interesting projects. Again, it's this point of, like, we all have an enormous amount of data on our phones, from our Whoops, our Apple Watches, our Fitbits, whatever, Aura rings, etc., etc. It's all collecting data all the time, and those projects, ReflexDAO and Rejuve.ai, are looking at ways to take that data anonymously and use it for sort of the betterment of humanity, I suppose you could say. So if data is the new oil, well, then health data is like your highest octane petrol, basically. It's the good stuff. So yeah, it could help with all sorts of cure research, etc., etc. Very, very interesting space. Again, most of this med tech is around data, I would say. So genomes and data lake, I think, kind of are somewhat self-explanatory in the names, but by all means, feel free to look into them if you want. Again, we will do another episode where we dig into each of these in a lot more detail. We'll try and get the founders on for a quick chat, quick 10-minute chat maybe. And if there's anything we missed here, if there's some awesome medical DePIN, medical decentralized project that we haven't mentioned here, tell us, because I certainly would love to dig in more. Alrighty.
Sure. That's a little bit out of the only, I'll say Dynex is one. There you do neuromorphic computing, and they're a really interesting one to take a look at, because they actually are leaving DePIN to having an IPO. to be a publicly traded
Wow.
company. So they'll be the first to do that. We'll see how successful it is, because some of these other projects, if DePIN is underperforming, maybe they'll follow suit. And then I just shared this. I don't know if you can pull this up, but for anyone that wants to learn more, like my channel. So this is my channel here, DePIN Connection. Here's like the deep dive. So a lot of the stuff we covered today, I've Rover on there, Exhibits, DABA, Weather XM, Wing. I mean, you name it. I've covered a lot of projects there. And then also, as far as interviews with project founders, I've had DABA, Deep Network, Wingbits, Exhibits, Demo. I've done one-on-one interviews with a lot of these project founders. So certainly check that out if you want to learn more about those projects. And we will be doing more of these that are less of such a large overview and more concentrated on specific categories. But I thought it was a great session, though, to kind of do an overview for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm just kind of going through we have to start somewhere, and I felt like doing an overview made sense for the first episode, but that was a lot to cover, and we're over 2 hours on this stream now. So I know my voice is starting to get a bit hoarse, and I didn't even do most of the talking, so you probably won't be able to speak after this. We will definitely dive into each of these projects, because I feel like they deserve the time and attention for us to talk about them. And I think it would be really awesome if we can get the founders on for the ones that we decide are doing the most interesting things at this particular time. I fully expect, like, if we do like 1 or 2 categories each month, and we've got nearly a year's worth of shows in that, and by then we could probably go around again, because a year in crypto is like 7 years in real time. So like dog years.
Like dog years.
Yeah. So like projects will be doing totally different things, and we'll have product extensions and pivots and all sorts of.
Yeah. And we'll have a bunch of new projects too, I'm sure. So
yeah, exactly. So yeah.
Well, hey, Neil, I appreciate it, man. This is a lot of fun. For those of you that stuck with us, thanks for giving us so much of your time. And I have meetings the rest of the day, so hopefully by the end of the day my voice might be gone, but I'm still good for now.
You're doing sign language on your next deep dive.
There you go.
All right. Thanks a million for joining us, everybody. Thanks a million, Brad. And this was really fun. I'm really looking forward to diving into each of these, and we'll see what happens when we do that next time.
Sure.
Probably in about a month's time. It'll be sometime in middle of November, I guess, if we stick to it, try and stick to some sort of schedule. So we'll see you all then.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.